going on, guys? Welcome into today's episode. My buddy Ryan Chaw is going to share his house hacking, room hacking, really his student housing model, very specific to student housing, and how he focuses on properties around college campuses and chops them up and, doubles or triples the income that you could generate just off of one tenant by renting to grad students, and really leveraging this niche strategy and how you can pretty much follow the same model. I mean, we dived into how he analyzed these deals, how he screens tenants, how he finds the right colleges, the right locations, how he manages these properties in state versus out of state, and really his plan for scaling to 100 of these things right now. He's got 14 properties, 90 tenants, and he started this out of a full-time job, working as a pharmacist and really wanting to pivot to something that could slowly replace his income over time. He did it much faster than he thought he would. And I know a lot of people who are high income earners that, know that they got to find a path to financial freedom instead of just trading time for money, diversifying some of that income into other real estate investments. And this is one great strategy that you can take a look at. So you're going to get the full kind of soup to nuts insight from Ryan on his model, his strategy, and how you could potentially follow something very similar in your own journey. Let's go ahead and dive into Ryan Chaw's episode. Welcome into the show, Ryan Chaw. How we doing, man?
I'm doing great. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. I know that you've got a really fun story that probably a lot of people would like to learn from and, quote unquote, pick your brain on, right? I know a lot of, W-2 high income earners, they always start kind of looking outside of their field at some point and go, man, I'm grinding really hard in my business, trading time for money. I got to find a way to at least start generating some wealth and some passive income outside of my career. And real estate always kind of seems to be the vehicle that makes a lot of sense to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And you're somebody that has done that at a really high level. So I'm excited to kind of hear a little bit more about your journey. When you were first starting your career, tell us a little bit about, kind of where you began this journey from.
Yeah, so I started out as a pharmacist. I was inspired by my grandpa to get into real estate because he bought a couple properties in the San Francisco Bay Area back in the 50s when they were dirt cheap. And as we all know, they was appreciated like crazy. And not only did the rent go up, he was able to retire early, but also able to cover part of my college tuition and that of my brothers as well. So
Wow.
it kind of created generational wealth for us. But I basically started from zero, used my own money. I started working as a pharmacist in 2016 and started buying houses on the side. I bought one a year, and after about 4 years, I was able to make $10,755 per month. And then I started buying out of state, and now I have 5 in California, 8 in Ohio, and 1 in Alabama. And so those are, making over 50K a month. And I use a very specific method for investing. I will take a single family home, add as many bedrooms as I could, typically up to 5 or 6 bedrooms, and I'll rent out by the room. I'll do the same thing for duplexes. I'll have like 5 bedrooms on each side. And if it's like 10 bedrooms times, let's say 600 or 700 per room, you can imagine, I have a house that's making about $6,600 a month because it has those 10 bedrooms. So by renting out by the room, I'm typically able to double or triple the amount of rental income that I'll usually make at the house if I rent it out to a whole family.
Very cool. Well, I know we're going to dive into that model and kind of how you analyze these deals, how you finance them, how you, kind of find the tenants, manage them, all that good stuff. Before we do, I want to hear a little bit more about your grandfather and like his entrepreneurial mindset, right? Back in the 50s,
Yeah, back in the 50s.
deciding that he wanted to invest in San Francisco, and obviously he kind of laid the foundation for obviously himself, but it sounds like for his kids and his grandkids.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit more about like his story, his journey. What got
Yeah,
him
of
into
course.
thinking?
So back in the 50s was kind of like the communist revolution. So all of the, people in China that if they were a landlord, they were basically kind of put in these kind of like internment camps, like work camps. And so both my grandpas actually were trying to escape that. And so they came to America. They wanted to start fresh and, own their own house and be a landlord actually in California.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, they encountered some racism back then. They knocked on many doors. They had the doors literally slammed on their faces. But my grandma was actually the one who was persistent. She was able to establish a relationship with a nice Italian family in San Francisco and was able to buy that first set of six flats. And my grandpa managed it. So they did it together. And they bought that first set of six flats on basically my grandpa's military salary. He was working in the military at the time as a draftsman. And yeah, from there, he just kind of continued on. Obviously, houses were a lot cheaper back then
Yeah.
versus now. I don't know if you would be able to buy a full set of six flats in San Francisco with a military salary, but that's just the power of real estate. You buy early, and then prices eventually just end up going up and up and up.
Yeah, it's always going up. So they landed in California. We're living in the city, and your grandfather got into the military. And then, did he ever tell you like what his mindset was behind why he decided to start investing in real estate? Outside of a lot of people like, hey, I just want to buy my own home. I'm good. I own a
Yeah.
house. He
Right.
was thinking more of like wealth building and being on the equity side, the ownership side. Did he ever share more of insights around like what got him on that mindset, or who, kind of turned him on to that ideology around investing?
Honestly, he always was into building wealth and building prosperity for our family. I think it's a very cultural thing. Honestly, he didn't necessarily say like what set him on that path, but I think the fact that he was coming in as an immigrant and there's just this the land of opportunity, he just pursued every opportunity he was given and went for it. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to really discuss real estate as much with him before he passed because I think he passed right when I got started in real estate. He was very proud when I bought my first rental.
Nice.
But then, he passed away like a year or two later, unfortunately. But yeah.
So you decided to kind of not go the real estate route in the beginning. You went to school, got your degree, you became a pharmacist. Like what led you down that path first?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things was there was an accelerated pharmacy program, and I got into it. So I was like, I might as well just do that for now. And I always wanted to get into a field where I'm helping people,
Mhm.
and healthcare was perfect for that. And pharmacy wasn't like working long hours like a physician, for example.
Yeah.
So it was just like right up my alley. Um, and so, as worked as a pharmacist, I would see these senior pharmacists, and some of them were hating life. They're like, yeah, I wish I could have retired like 10 years earlier, but I'm stuck here because I have to, make a paycheck and pay the bills. Even these, pharmacists who are making, $90 an hour or whatnot, right?
Yeah,
They're
what's the
still.
average salary of like a pharmacist range wise?
Sure. So retail pharmacy back then it was like 65 an hour. It went up to like maybe $70 an hour. This is in California, of course. So obviously it'll depend on what state. But nowadays, like if you work at a healthcare or a hospital in California, they usually pay 90, I think upwards to $100 an hour, pretty close to $100 an hour now. It went up with inflation and everything.
So what does that equate to like in an annual salary?
I think about 200K,
Okay. Okay.
roughly. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So you were seeing a lot of, high income earners say they don't have enough time and they have to work a long time in order
Yeah.
to, get to a place where they can feel like they can retire?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. A lot of these people, like in their 50s and 60s, they didn't have the best attitude. They were just kind of coming in and, going through the motions. And mainly the young guys would pick up all the slack, basically. But that's how it was. And I was like, man, these guys aren't really enjoying their life in their 50s and 60s. I don't want to be like that. I
Yeah.
don't want to end up that way too. Obviously, it also depends on your attitude, of course. But I was like, I want to put myself on a different path. And so that's why I got into real estate. I think I bought my first property about a year after I started working. I just worked as much as possible. I worked these 14-hour, 15-hour shifts, and then I just slowly bought one property a year. I wasn't always able to even put a 20% down. On the second one, I only could put a 10% down. So I did whatever I could to try to get one house a year.
And so how did you kind of come to the strategy that you landed on? You know, you looking at real estate, obviously there's a lot of different paths down real estate strategies that you can go. What led you to kind of this house hacking, room rental, student housing model that you landed on?
Yeah, one of my good buddies, he was doing this in college where his aunt helped fund a down payment for one of the houses that he got nearby the campus, near my alma mater where I went to pharmacy school. And he just rented out to his college buddies. And not only was he living for free, but he was making some cash flow on top of that. So I was
Mhm.
like, wow, this strategy actually works. So I bought my first property in the same area, Stockton, California, where I went to pharmacy. And I bought it for 262,000 back in 2016. Nowadays, they've gone up
I like that price point. I
significantly.
wish those would come back.
I know, right? Yeah, so all the houses now, like my first house I sold for 437,000. So all the houses now are like in the 400K range, but back then 262,000 seemed like a lot of money.
Yeah.
And so it's all relative, with
Yep.
inflation and wage increases, eventually you look back and you say, "Oh, that was dirt cheap."
Yeah, that's so true. So you found that house, you put 20% down. Did you just get a traditional mortgage on that?
Yeah, 20% down. Oh, actually, no, I didn't. I did 100,000 down because I really didn't know what I was doing. That shows you how naive I was when I was getting started.
So you put
Um,
way more down than
I
the
did,
20%
yeah.
that was needed.
Yeah, I did. I put 100K down. I really didn't know that you could just put 20% down. And I just got started from there.
I love it. So instead of thinking you got to have it all figured out, you just took action, you
Yeah,
got in the game, and you started to, think, all right, I'm going to rent out all these rooms. You weren't living in the house, correct?
correct. Yes,
Okay. And
feels it.
so how did you start finding the tenants? How did you think about the management of it? What was, the approach as a new real estate investor kind of getting into the game and cutting your teeth
Yeah.
on this first deal?
Well, I always like read that you can put a sign on the lawn for rent, to just put your number. And I did that. I got a lot of random calls from tenants that I would not ever want at my house. So I learned that you have to really have targeted marketing. So for students, you got to ask, where do the students hang out? College students, right? Because I'm very close to the college. So typically I would post on like Facebook housing groups. I found those work very effectively. There's specific sites. A lot of the colleges have affiliate sites for off-campus housing, so they direct all their students that are looking for off-campus housing to a specific website, for example. And so a lot of schools have that, and I usually post on those. There's also just apartments.com. There's you could post on something called Avail, Avail, and it'll blast your ad out to multiple different sites, and that's free. So I have all these, ads on all these different sites to reach the students. But typically the Facebook housing groups have worked very well. Um, and then the apartments.com, I would say, works pretty well. And of course, the college affiliate sites.
Now, we all know that, a good tenant can be a godsend and a bad tenant can, completely crush your profits and,
Sure. Yeah.
your cash flow on real estate investment. So how were you screening the tenants, or what is your process for making sure you're getting the right tenants that, fit the model that you're doing with that investment strategy?
Yeah, so tenants are definitely the Achilles heel of any real estate investing. You have to have the right tenant. So what I do is I invest near top end colleges. I will literally Google US News top colleges in whatever state that I'm looking in. And so I'm near some top colleges. For example, I'm near Case Western University in Ohio. I'm near UOP. I'm near CSU Sacramento, which is still listed on the top college list. And so those colleges usually have a lot of grad programs. So I look for graduate studies like pharmacy, dentistry, MD, nursing, etc., or law degree, for example. And I want to be nearby those colleges so that I can get those grad students. Typically, what's really cool is that these colleges, they really don't have enough housing for graduate students. They provide enough for undergrads a lot of times, or a good amount for undergrads, but they don't promise enough housing for grad students. In fact, most of them don't provide any housing for them. So you'll have like 3,000 grad students who are looking for housing and have to stay off campus. So
Mhm.
they either stay in an apartment or they stay at a house. And so that's where we come in. There's so much demand for off campus housing because I'm charging, let's say, $600 or $700 per room. In Sacramento, it might be more like 850. Um, and then it's a lot cheaper than on-campus housing because they're charging like $1,200. Plus, you have to pay for a meal plan, you have to pay for parking, you might have to pay for laundry, etc.
Right.
So students are saving a lot of money just by renting with us. In fact, they're saving about half their money. So it's very, very popular because of that.
Are there any particular amenities that you like to include in your properties that you find are necessary or allow you to charge more or, increase your cash flow as a result of adding those into your model?
So I provide typical furnishings because a lot of times I get international students, people who are coming from international to do a rotation or a residency
Mhm.
or a fellowship, like in medicine, for example. So I do provide all the furnishings because they basically come to America with their backpack and maybe a luggage bag, right? So they don't have furniture. I also sometimes provide things like electric scooters. And I just kind of give it to them free of charge while they obviously sign a liability form, but they'll use that to get to classes sometimes. So I kind of really cater towards students specifically. A lot of times I'll even send them the shuttle map so they know, like, here's the shuttle stop. This is how you can get to campus on the shuttle. It takes like 5 minutes to get there. And so all of my houses are really conveniently located either by a shuttle stop or within a walkable distance to campus.
Nice. So almost like a little bit of a little tiny Airbnb flair, right? Of like
Yeah.
providing some things that attract the right people to want to come stay at your property. And what's the average length of a tenant that's staying with you? Is it like a 3 month or 6 month? Are you signing year
Right.
leases? What does that look like?
Yeah, believe it or not, everyone ends up on a year lease at the end. So they're allowed to obviously sublet during the summertime if they're not there during summer school. But a lot of these people who are doing like rotations or they're doing professional schools, they're usually there throughout the year, essentially, and they might have a 4 week winter break or something like this. But yes, they do sign 1 year leases eventually. But if I'm buying a house like in the middle of January, obviously I'll have some short term renters to get me until August, which is the fall semester when everyone comes in.
Very cool. Now, management wise, I can understand, that when you've got a lot of bodies under one roof, management sometimes can feel more intensive. Is that the case in this model? And how do you kind of manage your properties? Are you
Yeah.
self managing? Are
Yeah.
you doing third party management?
Yeah, a lot of people think it's going to be like a wild party animal house for all of the student houses, but that's not the case. If you just imagine like renting out to medical professionals, pre-law or lawyers, etc., they're generally much better and much more responsible and mature than the general population, I would say.
Yeah.
So I generally get really good tenants. And with that being said, even if there is like one bad tenant, usually the other tenants will kind of straighten them out. Like if one of them wants to have a party, the others are like, no, we got midterms and finals to study for. You're not going to have a party, right? So yeah, to the best of my knowledge, I haven't had any house parties for the last couple years. And as far as managing the tenants themselves, I do have like a boots on the ground property manager. Now, I don't pay her 8 to 12% because I still do all the marketing. And I do have some virtual assistants to kind of do the marketing
Hmm.
and respond to maintenance requests and things like that. But I do pay the property manager on a per cases basis if she goes to the house to, I don't know, fix an appliance, for example, et cetera.
Very cool. And how are you analyzing these deals? Like what is your kind of buy box criteria? What are you looking at in order to determine whether it meets kind of the cash flow goals or the IRR or what's kind of your analysis and how are you looking at this through a financial lens?
Sure. Yeah. So what makes us so popular is because we're so close to the school. So we just have leads pouring in. We have a long wait list too. And it's just because we're known as the people who are very, very close to the campus. And again, most of mine are walkable distance. Some of them are literally across the street from campus. So that's number one. But I would also say that you need to have a pretty sizable house. Actually, all of my houses are 1,500 square foot or more.
Okay.
And the reason for that is you want to get 5 or 6 bedrooms in there, ideally. And that's a really good sweet spot for college students because they're willing to stay in with like five. Maybe they have a group of 5 or 6. Once it goes past that, they kind of start getting a little bit nervous about having too many people at the house.
Sure.
But if you can get it to like 6 bedrooms and each bedroom is 700 a month, that's like $4,200 per month for a single family house. And a lot of these single family houses that I buy, especially out of state, they could be in the 200 and like 215,000 to $350,000 price range, and renting out for like 3,600 to $4,200 a month.
Those are nice numbers. I like those.
Yeah, yeah.
So as you were still working full time, I know a lot of people that make good incomes and they want to start diversifying outside of their job and their career. How did you manage keeping your career on track while starting to invest outside? How did you manage your schedule? And
Yeah.
what did that look like from kind of a habits and a discipline perspective for you to be able to do it successfully and still show up at your job and, meet all of the requirements that obviously many people's careers have?
Sure. Yeah. So I do a lot of tenant empowerment. Basically, when they go into the house, we'll have somebody, the virtual assistant now, but I used to do it at the beginning. I just go through all the house rules. Hey, this is how you change a light bulb. This is what happens if this happens. This is, something to watch out for. And I would kind of just go through that list with them one on one and really kind of empower them to basically handle kind of most of the common household issues. Um, I also had basically a protocol for tenant to tenant conflict, basically having them kind of talk it through with the other person, come up with an action plan, implement that plan, and then go from there. So by putting in these like tenant empowerment protocols, I was able to self manage this while working pretty much 60 hours a week at the very beginning of my
Wow.
job. I I would say for the first 3 years, I put in a lot of extra hours to try to raise up more and
Right.
more capital to invest. So I was able to do this on the side by having those systems in place. I also had a bookkeeping system. I basically use Excel. It's very simple. Just, downloading the utilities, dividing it among the tenants and sending that out, and then checking if the rent came in. I would do that pretty much, around the end of the month. And then, yeah, make sure that the rent was paid, the utilities were paid, and then go from there.
How were you looking at, hey, when I get to this level, then I'll feel comfortable leaving my job? I know everybody's got, different risk profile and their goals are different, all that kind
Sure.
of stuff. But what was your mindset around if and when you were gonna get ready to leave your career as a high paying pharmacist
Oh,
to
yeah.
go out and be a entrepreneur in the real estate space?
Sure, sure. So to calculate my financial freedom number, well, basically my financial freedom number was pretty plain and simple. Once I replaced my pharmacist income, I said I would quit. And so I kind of calculated out, okay, how many houses do I need to replace the pharmacist income? If each house makes, 1,500 or 2,500 or $3,000 a month in net cash flow, I basically added up how many houses I needed to achieve that position where I completely replaced my pharmacist income. And then once I set that date, I was like, this is the date that it would probably happen. Then I just set that date and quit on that date, which was August of 2023.
August of 2023. So what is, what do things look like now for you as a full-time real estate investor?
Well, it's very nice. Obviously, you get to set your own schedule. So if you want to take off a day, you can ask your boss, which is yourself, if you're going to take that day off. I would say, though, I do spend a lot of time leading and training my team. So my goal is to eventually scale to 100 properties. So I have, I would say 2 full-time VAs now. I have another part-time VA I just hired on. And so a lot of my time is just spent really training them through all the processes. I do have 90 tenants. And so, they're kind of taking care of the back end operations for all 90 tenants. But then, again, like I said, I hope to continue to reinvest the income that I'm getting from this into more properties and eventually scale to 100 student rentals.
Amazing. Have you thought of now that you've kind of, really got your hands wrapped around the model and the pros and cons of it, and maybe we could talk on that real quick of like what are some of the cons of this model, or how are you mitigating those risks with this model?
Sure. Yeah. So I guess something that a lot of people worry about that does happen is tenant versus tenant conflict,
Mm.
right? So again, I kind of have a step-by-step process for this. I tell them, hey, why don't you talk one-on-one with the person that you're upset about, and then tell them why you're upset and come up with an actionable plan to implement within the next 2 weeks. And then after those 2 weeks, come back and tell me, how things are going. Typically, like 95% of the time, they don't come back. Either they learned how to tolerate it, or they've somehow worked it out with the other tenant. If it still occurs, then I will then talk to that tenant directly, the one that is causing the trouble, and I'll say, "Hey, look, the other tenants. I'm getting reports from the other tenants that this is occurring. I just want to see your perspective as well." And then I will say, "Okay, what can you do to mitigate this issue?" So the other tenants don't get pissed off. And then I'll basically have them implement that plan. Um, if it doesn't work, obviously the last step is going to their parent potentially. So I had a tenant who was smoking marijuana in California back when it was still illegal. So eventually I just had to go straight to the parent. The parent obviously had a stern talk with their kid, and that was it. That was the end of that.
Got it.
So there is kind of like a little bit of a step by step process. Plus, you always have the parents to fall back on. Same thing for rent. The parents are usually the ones actually paying the rent. So you're never really going to end up with unpaid rent, because what parent is going to let their child get evicted from the place where they're studying, right? For school.
Interesting. So the parents are really the ones on the lease and kind of guaranteeing the lease and making the
Yeah, they're
payments.
co-signing on the lease. Yeah, exactly.
Now, you've got 14 properties, 90 tenants. You want to scale to 100. What's the goal behind that? Is it a cash flow goal? Is it a net worth goal? What is driving you to that 100, property milestone?
I want to be the best student housing provider in the area. I really enjoy like making these places really great for students. Like I said, providing things like electric scooters and whatever I can to make their stay more comfortable. And I just, want to expand. I think, like, the more houses we have, the stronger the brand I can build as well. And I can, with the scale that I want to achieve, I can become the go-to person for student housing in the colleges that I invest in. And I think it's really great because like in college, I wanted to stay with a group of like 5 or 6 people, but in the apartments, it's very hard to do that. But
Yeah.
if you're at a house, you can get 5 of your buddies and rent out the whole house.
So for somebody that, is interested in this model and they, want to get started, they want to buy their first kind of student housing rental property. And obviously for new real estate investors, right, they feel like they just have to know everything. If there was one thing that they needed to focus on in the beginning to kind of build that momentum and get them started, what would you say that is?
I would say choosing the right college is pretty big, because one thing you can't change is your location, right?
Yeah.
So really put some thought into what college you're going to invest in. I typically choose ones with plenty of graduate programs. Like I said, one of the colleges I invest in has a law program, they have a nursing program, they have a medicine program. They have several different options. So I do get a lot of grad students because of that. And I think you will just, by virtue of buying in that nearby that college, you will always get high quality tenants.
Mhm.
Like that's almost like a guarantee, because there's always going to be new people every single year going into the law degree program or becoming, a physician, etc.
Yeah. Now, do you see scale becoming a problem at some point and that you're going to want to consolidate into like maybe a commercial asset, or do you see this being the model that you're going to stick with for the rest of your investing career?
I think I'm going to be sticking with this for a while. Um, potentially I could like 1031 into something like an apartment complex. But with that being said, I always love staying at houses. I know students really enjoy staying at houses, having their privacy, not having to pay for parking and go to the fifth floor to get to their, apartment or whatnot. So yeah, I definitely will be sticking with this, probably expanding to different cities. Like I love Houston, Texas. It has a plenty of universities, and there's several other cities that I'm kind of looking at as well. But my goal is to, get to 100. So it could be 10 properties in 10 different cities. It could be 20 properties in 5 cities. I don't know. We'll see.
Well, I know a lot of people are going to be interested in the model. They're going to want to know more about what you got going on. And I know you're putting out a lot of content, a lot of training, a lot of education around it. Where's the best
Yes.
place for them to learn more if they want to dive in?
So, a couple of places you can reach me, but I would say just go to www.newbierealestateInvesting.com/guide and then get on the email list. It will give you a free PDF guide, which goes through kind of my journey, how all the mistakes I made, how I resolved them, and how I got into student housing, and what you can do to get into student housing yourself. Again, that's www.newbierealestateInvesting.com/guide. And newbie is spelled Newbie. I also have a YouTube channel, so you can just look up Ryan Chaw YouTube and you'll find me there. Yeah, but you can reach me on all those avenues. Those are the primary ones, I would say.
Ryan, appreciate you coming on the show, brother.
All right, thanks again, Matt.
Well, that wraps up today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. As always, you guys know this show would not be what it is without you, the amazing listener, the support, sharing this out with other people who can gain value from it, taking 60 seconds to leave a review. If you haven't done so already, those things mean the world to us and ultimately help us spread this message out to as many people as we possibly can to help them on their wealth building journey. If you have any particular links or resources that you're trying to track down that were mentioned in this interview, be sure to check out this episode at millionairemindcast.com, where you can find access to all that information. And of course, if you haven't checked out the Wise Investor Vault yet, be sure to head over to wiseinvestorvault.com to check out all the tools, all the resources, the checklists, the spreadsheets, the trackers, all kinds of amazing things that can help you on your wealth building journey at the wiseinvestorvault.com. If you haven't connected with me on social media yet, I'm consistently putting out more content, stories, value to help you on your wealth building journey. And one of the best and most exciting things for me on a weekly basis is getting to connect with you guys. Getting your DMs, hearing what things impacted you, what you need help with is a big way that we continue to drive the content for this show. So if we're not connected and following each other on Instagram, on social media at Official Matty A, give me a like and a follow. Would love to connect with you there. And of course, don't forget to get on my deals list. If you're an accredited investor, you want to look at more deal flow. You want to see what deals I have access to, what deals I'm raising capital for. This is an exclusive list that I only put out to my accredited investor list, my Millionaire Mindcast family. So text the word deals to 844-447-1555. And with that being said, thank you again so much for supporting the show. Until next week's episode, keep investing in yourself and your wealth on your march to $1 million and beyond. Cheers.